on. We're ready to go.
You're on.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the open meeting for Thursday, February 16th, 2023, and ask the Commission Secretary for information on today's agenda.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the minutes of the open meeting of Thursday, February 9th, 2023, and each has informed me there's no need to discuss the minutes.
Move we approve the minutes of Thursday, February 9th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Each commissioner has independently reviewed the agenda, and each has informed me there's no need to discuss the notices associated with agenda items 2 through 5, or the suggested minute associated with agenda item 9, approving the application of Superior Water, Light, and Power Company to issue and have outstanding up to $20 million of short-term debt during 2023, with the condition that the applicant submit an itemized disclosure of all cleanup-related expenses incurred in 2023.
Move we approve the notices of investigation associated with agenda items 2 and 3.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Move we approve the notice of proceeding associated with agenda item 4.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Move we approve the notice of preliminary hearing in docket 1 AC 258.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
In docket 5820 SB 141, I move we approve the application of Superior Water, Light, and Power Company for authority to issue and have outstanding debt not to exceed $20 million during 2023, and to provide an itemized disclosure of all cleanup-related expenses incurred in 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that brings us to agenda item 6, which is one of 3 PLI dockets that we have in front of us from Alliant Energy against Madrill Excavating. This first one is 9300-PLI-112. In all 3 cases, the administrative law judge put together a proposed final decision, which would impose fines on the excavating company for their violations against the one-call law, and part of those fines then go to the educational fund, the general fund. Those proposed final decisions, I did not have any changes. I know that the utility filed comments suggesting that we levy a more severe penalty against the excavating company. I was not inclined to do that, absent getting more information. And so for agenda items 6, 7, and 8, I was prepared to accept the ALJ's proposed final decisions without modification. So I will turn it over to my colleagues for discussion.
Okay, thanks. There's 2 basically components to these discussions, and again, all 3 of them I'll discuss all 3 at the same time. One is the violations themselves. It is concerning that this entity had so many, particularly so close to each other. Clearly, it's concerning that if it happens once and then 2-3 weeks later, it happens again, and that happened multiple times. So this is almost the poster child for why this entity and why this process was created, so we can start to catch these and impose fines, and also importantly require attendance at education for all the employees, because it is very fortunate that there were no lives lost or injury as a result of some of these violations. But there was loss of gas use for multiple people for several hours. So, and that's, it's not inconsequential. So, and their disregard for not only the Diggers Hotline response, but this commission's response, which it is not disputed that it was received by them multiple times. You know, that is of concern to me. And I think that so then once they did show up at the hearing, they attempted to offer some countervailing evidence, and I think, you know, there was also, you know, the complainant themselves, I think, brought some information forward, but also I think failed to back up some of the issues themselves. I think there was, it fell short on their side as well throughout this process. I don't want to just talk about the respondent here in total, but the complainant certainly did their job in bringing this to our attention. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have done that, but I think there was some information in the record on their part too that was lacking, that caused, I think, some more work on our end. And, you know, we have no jurisdiction over Diggers Hotline, and there's when it's difficult because sometimes when we get there's not a lot of there, and then the heavy lifting then comes to us. And this one, I think, required an inordinate amount of time, perhaps, that should have been necessary. So having said all that part, I think, though, based on the violations, I think the ones that there was a finding of a violation, I don't disagree with the ones where there wasn't a finding of a violation. I don't disagree with that either. I also don't disagree with the amount of the fine assessed. So I wanted to say all that. I also, you know, as you noted, Chair, the complainant brought forth an interesting interpretation of the law, and I'm not inclined to agree with that, but I also know that in their response letter, they aren't contesting it. And while we didn't hear any counter argument to it, it's not necessary for us to decide. And I also was not clearly on board with the proposed order point, the order and how it was worded. I think my interpretation and my analysis would be different than what was put in the order by the proposed order from the administrative law judge. So my proposal would be, and I have a handout and we'll get this to you, Chair, is to strike that entire portion related to the increased ability to enhance the forfeiture based on the non-response to us or Diggers Hotline. Like I said, I'm inclined not to agree with that, but there wasn't both sides presented here. And again, we don't need to get to that. And I certainly do believe, and I think it was taken into consideration as an aggregating factor in assessing the fine. So I think that's sufficient for the purposes of today. So what I have is a handout that strikes that entire section, but acknowledges that the complainant brought that forward, but we need not decide that issue here since it was acknowledged and no longer contested by the complainant as well.
And Chair Bach, I have emailed that to you. And for those listening at home, I only gave you one side. It should be posted on the events calendar.
So then, Commissioner Nowak, would you also strike the opinion section?
The entire, the
So,
opinion section,
failure
yes,
to
for sure.
respond to
Yeah,
panel?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't see there
It's
was a back
two-sided.
side.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on the second page. Yep.
Strike the failure to respond. Okay.
Commissioner Nowak, can you explain the reasoning behind your proposed change number 2 in striking conclusion of law item 9?
Well, it goes to the heart that we're saying that right now there is no duty to respond that we can enforce by separate forfeiture. We're saying that we could, it is not that the law doesn't allow a separate forfeiture for failure to respond.
Right. Yeah, and for what it's worth, Chair, I had the same concern. I thought the judge's discussion was very well thought through and interesting, but I think we would want to retain that capacity on future cases that if it may be the case that in a future case we need to retain the capability, or a different legal analysis may conclude that we can issue a forfeiture specifically for non-compliance with the process. So I didn't want to foreclose that option in the future, and that effectively, this section and that number 9, conclusion of law number 9 would tie our hands in the future. So I'm in agreement with Commissioner Nowak on making an adjustment.
So it removes it to leave it as
Open for the
we're not
future.
answering it, yeah.
Right.
Because, and like I said, I said where I'm leaning, but we didn't hear both sides of it. But I do agree, it's more like a summons and complaint and the civil process where the default judgment is that.
That's interesting because it's really interesting to hear both of your perspectives, because I read this as the opposite. I read this as saying that we, the commission, can enforce that separate forfeiture under 3D1, regardless of whether or not the respondent replies. So by taking that out, I worry that now we're saying, well, we have to wait for the respondent to respond.
No.
Huh.
Yeah.
Cindy, you want to
Yeah.
chime in? Or?
Yeah, I think what the heart was here was that, not that the commission can't then enforce for the lack of response, it was, can the commission assess a penalty for their failure to respond to the panel, was the issue. I didn't read it, and I don't think that was the ALJ's, because he then went on to, even though they didn't respond, he then went on to assess forfeitures. So I think we're all in agreement that whether or not they respond or don't, the commission has authority. The point of contention was, is there another penalty assessment for that failure to respond to the panel?
Yeah, the key word is separate in that section.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, well, you two can go ahead with that. I just don't interpret it that way. I think we're all of the same mind in terms of what we should be able to do, and I agree with you, Commissioner Nowak, that this particular company, their flagrant disregard for the law is concerning. I think that the one, as a general matter, the one call law needs to have more teeth in it. But I'm going to stay where I am, and I'm going to think about this the next time it comes around. And I understand that you are then proposing this according to your handout for all
Yes.
3 decisions. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up. Oh,
Go ahead.
I was just going to follow up that I'm in the same spot as you both on the penalties. I thought the judge did a really good job of sifting and winnowing through the evidence and assigning penalties that were appropriate for the actions, in particular because of the multitude, the continued situation. As you mentioned, Commissioner Nowak, Madrell didn't do everything wrong. It seemed, I mean, they did a lot of, and there was evidence of the calling to get the lines marked and recalling to get them remarked. They obviously were there. They participated in helping alleviate the situation at the end. They helped with emergency services. So it wasn't, I think we've seen one before where there was absolutely no help given at all, and they covered it up and ran away and never told anybody. So I think that the difference between that case and this is evident in the difference in the fines. This is not the maximum that we've ever levied, but it is a substantial, because there's, over the course of these, there's 9 different
Yeah, because
instances.
even though they were there, they repeated it again the next time.
Repeated it again and
seemed
did
to learn
not,
from
they
it.
did not correct.
Yeah.
And I think this sends the signal that
Yeah.
you need to do it the right way, otherwise each single one is going to be looked at individually and aggregated for a penalty. So that was my comments.
Yeah, and I was just trying to get some clarification from you, Madam Chair, in terms of, we can certainly note your dissent on this specific issue in a footnote, or is the change such that you will dissent from the entire revised order?
Oh, heavens, no.
Okay.
I think reasonable minds can differ on the reasoning behind number 9. And I'm just not there
Okay.
for conclusions of law. Because I firmly believe in finding of law number 10, and that is that we can consider aggregating and mitigating factors when we set our forfeiture amount. So this is not.
Okay.
I'm not
reflect.
prepared to, yeah.
Sorry, we'll just reflect that that dissent on the issue of this particular component. And then just so that everyone's clear, there will be other, as we convert these proposed ALJ orders to final decisions, and I think it's noted at the top of Commissioner Nowak's handout, there are some other additions, obviously, to bring procedurally the order up to date with where we are procedurally as well. And so I just want to be clear, there will be some further edits to that order.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And I'm happy, Commissioner Nowak, that you included that in your handout, because I know that has sometimes been fodder for lawsuits filed against us. And so I recognize the fact that, while we don't utter every single word that will turn it into our final order, that we are agreeing to what should appear in the final order as it gets converted.
Correct. Okay, I'll do 3 separate motions. All right. Which one's first? Docket 9300 PLI 112, I move that we approve the proposed final decision as modified.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So I'm just saying, I'm adopting them, right?
Yep.
Because it's just going to be noted in the footnote. Okay, good. Aye.
In docket 9300 PLI 114, I move that we approve the proposed final decision as modified.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And Commissioner, before you do the third one, can
Yeah.
I just briefly talk to legal counsel?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. Hey, Maddie.
There's nobody out on the roads, nobody out on the sidewalks. She's literally barking at the snow.
Preemptive.
Right.
Okay, thanks for that. You're good to go.
Thank you. Okay, docket 9300 PLI 116, I move that we approve the proposed final decision as modified.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that takes us to agenda item 10, which is docket 6630-CC-237934. This goes back to July of last year. We received a complaint from the city of Glendale based on the number and duration of power outages in the city over the past several years. Specifically on July 25th of 2022, the City Council unanimously approved a resolution that encouraged residents to file a complaint with us at the commission and authorized the city to file their complaint with us regarding We Energy's service in the city of Glendale. The We Energy's responded with information, and now it is up to us to decide whether or not the city of Glendale's request to have a hearing to continue the discussions with the utility about steps that the utility can take to work on the number and the duration of outages. So we can either grant the request for a formal investigation or we can deny it. It looks like there was additional information provided by We Energies. And then we did hear back from the city of Glendale after We Energies provided that information, and they have reiterated their request for a formal review. So for this one, I was at alternative 1. I would grant the city's request for a formal investigation. I think we don't get a lot of these, especially from municipalities. So I think that when it rises to the level of the municipality taking the action of passing a resolution to have a discussion about that, I take that seriously, and I take that to mean that the municipality is looking to us to help them figure out how to solve the problem of frequent and recurring outages in their municipality. So that's not to say that we know what the end result is going to be, but I do think that there's enough questions raised in the information that was provided that it necessitates opening a formal complaint. So for this, I would be at alternative 1, and I would grant the city of Glendale's request. Commissioner Nowak?
Yeah, thanks. It is concerning the number of outages that took place in the city, and the utility has acknowledged that it did exceed at a certain time some of their standard or their preferred outage times, the SAIDI and SCAPE numbers. So they did take the corrective action. They went to the city council meeting. Sounds like they've had multiple contacts with city employees. A lot of, though, if you look at the outages, they're being caused by, most of them are caused by trees. You always have the squirrel. There was a balloon incident. It's not, it would be different if it was actual equipment failure. I'd have a different level of concern, right? If it was their lack of upgrading the system or maintenance of the system. So that, to me, makes this fall in a different category. And so the city has taken corrective action by doing a lot of tree clearing. And I find it somewhat unfortunate after the utility then went to the city council meeting, the city council then passed the resolution, because I don't know what the city wants undergrounding that comes at a very expensive cost. And the utility also, does have, we talked about it during the rate case, they are going to look at resiliency efforts throughout their entire system. So I would dismiss this just because I think that we need to sit and wait and see if the corrective actions that they took, which are really aimed at the greatest cause of the outages, the trees, if that's working. because I don't know what more we're going to get out of a hearing right now. We have to wait and see. It's premature, so I would dismiss it and have, if there is still an issue in a year after when we see the new numbers, then the city can address it with our consumer department. But to me, there's no longer a need. The city has the utility has already proceeded with, I think, what we would have reasonably asked them to do. Now, a lot of times this is somewhat ironic because we get calls about people complaining about their trees getting cut down. And why is the utility here cutting trees? And now we see one where this is why.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't see a need right now to do this. So I'm at alternative 2.
Okay. Commissioner Hebner?
Thank you. I respect both of your views on this. I came in at alternative 1. I do think that we should grant the formal request of the investigation because of the seemingly, widespread amongst these feeders performance that is, below or above average, whichever way you want to look at it, but not up to the standard that, we expect, and I think that the utility expects as well. For me, we open the investigation as a means to continue to collect the information, similar to what we've collected. Ideally, we can get the full year 2022 information, and then as 2023 progresses, when maybe halfway through the year, we can look at additional information. I know there will be other process related to this investigation, but I think continuing to gather data and see if the efforts We Energies has already taken can bear out in the numbers, which I hope they do. So for that reason, I think we should open and continue to investigate the matter.
Yeah, see, I don't disagree with the continued collection of the data, but to me, that could be done as just a matter of course. This was, as I stated again, this wasn't an equipment problem. This was, it sounds like it's a tree problem in the city.
Right.
And we can just have them report back on the results of the results of the tree trimming and how that's impacted their new numbers.
Okay.
So that's why
Right.
I'm not sure what a hearing advances this to do.
Okay.
I just want to be clear, as a matter of process, to the extent the investigation is done, 96.261M does require that if the commission does decide to open an investigation, it must have a public hearing as a minimum component. So my recommendation is, to the extent the desire is to open the investigation, that we do so pursuant to the issuance of a notice of proceeding. And then it'll have definitely a public hearing, and the parties can, to the extent there are parties, can decide any further process if that's acceptable to the commission.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, I'll make a motion. And docket 6630 CC 237934, I move that we grant the City of Glendale's request for an investigation of its complaint against Wisconsin Electric Power Company pursuant to the discussion today and the legal discussion of our chief legal counsel.
Okay, I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
And those opposed?
No?
Okay. That moves us to agenda item 11, which is docket 6630-EI-115. This is a request of Piper Electric for a temporary waiver of Wisconsin Administrative Code, PSC 1130803, regarding individual electric meters. So in this particular case, they are building a property that will consist of 46 residential dwelling units and a single commercial tenant space. They are having problems getting the meters. So this is a supply chain issue. And what they are proposing is that they be allowed to use a single meter And if we grant this temporary waiver, the owner of the building or the development would be the customer. They wouldn't resell the electricity to the tenants. And so it would be a master meter situation until such time as they're able to get the meters that they need. The utility does not oppose this request for a waiver, but they do request that we include conditions if we decide to grant the waiver. Specifically, they ask that we require Piper Power to provide documentation that the required meters cannot be procured because it's unavailable, that they would provide the utility with a quarterly status report, and that they would pay all costs associated with the temporary service in accordance with the utility's tariff. Now, that last condition is redundant because it's already a part of their tariff that Piper would be required to pay all of those costs. And then finally, We Energies asks that the waiver be granted only until June 1st. This is all according to the timeline that Piper had provided in their application. And then there was a alternative for us to consider delegating this type of decision to the administrator of the division of DCF. So in terms of the waiver itself, I'm at alternative 2, where I would grant their request, but I would include the conditions proposed by We Energies. I don't think that last condition that they proposed is necessary, because I think all it does is repeat what's in their tariff. So I wouldn't include that as a condition. And then in terms of delegation, I would not delegate this to the division administrator. I think it was brought up in the comments in this particular docket that there could be the unintended consequence of other developers if we decide to delegate this, that other developers would look at it and say, well, now this is going to be a part of my business plan, and the requirement for individual metering is in the code for a reason. And so I'm not inclined to delegate that authority for this type of a situation. Commissioner Nowak?
Okay. Yeah, I had several follow-up questions that Piper did respond back to staff with, because I wanted to get, this is a few months old.
Right.
And so I also was a little concerned that you called it an application, the letter just said we can't get this due to supply chain. And I think that if we are going, and I'm not doubting that there is a supply chain issue, but I think that if we're going to grant waivers under the law, we need a little more information about that. When did they anticipate, give me some evidence from the supplier? Because at this point, they said, I think the one supplier they had was no longer in business. And we could see a lot of these because there's apartment buildings going up every day in Madison, at least. And so this could, how much are we going to be seeing? But I don't doubt that there is, but I felt that we need a little more. So I don't disagree with the utilities' requests that we have some documentation regarding that. But anyway, in the meantime, I've since learned that they anticipate the new shipping date to be April 20th for the individual meters. So we're not too far off from that. And the building yet is still, it's not occupied, it's not ready. They're not just waiting on the meters. I also understand that there are delays due to multiple factors in the occupancy of the building. So it may be a situation where, we can grant the waiver, but they may never need to utilize it, given the status of the entire construction. But in any event, I agree that we can grant it under the exceptional or unusual circumstances. I think the argument about, the appliances and all that being more efficient and under the control, that fails. But I do think this would fall under the exceptional or unusual exception. I think I'm fine with the We Energy's proposed conditions as well. We don't need to put the redundant one in there as the charges. Piper would be responsible for any changes and charges in that. That's already in the tariff. They also did ask for damages, but I don't even know, there wasn't enough, even an estimate. I guess we could have them report later, but the foregoing revenue from the individual meters is liquidated damages. There wasn't any more specificity around that, so I'm not inclined to put any condition on that part. So I agree with you, Chair, that I can stay at alternative 2. You just didn't address the damage with the conditions you mentioned.
And there appears to be one other suggestion the applicant had, again, but I think maybe moot, that the applicant be subject to the disconnection procedures.
Yeah.
I note that the delegation alternatives had that they're not reselling. I wonder if that also be folded up to the
Yes.
beginning,
Yep.
because then that takes care of, you won't need that condition as well. So including the language that the applicant will not be reselling the energy might make some sense, as well as the other conditions that Chair Vach and Commissioner Nowak have discussed that We Energy proposed.
Yeah, they can't resell and they can't disconnect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and I would agree with you, Commissioner Nowak. I was not inclined, and thank you for pointing that out. I would not include the damages provision.
On the delegation, I agree, we should not delegate this. These are going to be, I think, very spec-specific, and I think we do need to have, maybe it may resolve itself soon, I don't know, but.
We hope.
Yeah, we hope, but I think we need to be able to view each of these on their own, so I would not delegate that.
Okay, Commissioner Hebner?
Yep, I'm in the exact same spot as you all. So I'm at alternative 2, conditions being, the tenants can't be disconnected, electricity can't be resold, provide the documentation that equipment is not available, and then the quarterly reports. So I am in the exact same spot.
Only till June 1.
Till June 1, and then-
This all expires.
They could ask for an extension
I
if
guess, yeah.
that April
Yeah.
20th doesn't come through.
Yeah.
I was a little more okay with delegating because I know we've got a lot more of these coming. There's a number, I don't know if it's 4 or 5, but I'm fine joining you at this point on alternative 3.
Okay.
Okay?
In docket 6630 EI 115, I move that we grant the request of Piper Electric for a temporary waiver of Wisconsin Administrative Code 113-08031 regarding individual electric meters pursuant to our discussion today.
Second.
All in favor?
Oh,
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that moves us to agenda item 12, which is 6680-AF-103. This is Wisconsin Power and Light Company's request to defer the retail portion of both incremental pre-certification costs and to begin accruing AFUDC on pre-construction costs associated with their development of a battery energy storage system on the previously authorized Grant County and Wood County solar generation facilities. They indicate or estimate that their total incremental pre-certification and pre-construction costs will be approximately $2.9 million. They are seeking a carrying cost at their most recently authorized short-term debt rate. And in the past, we have deemed it reasonable to do what they are asking. In terms of timing, and I think that this has come up before, they have asked to begin accruing carrying costs as of September 30th, which is the date of their application. And so as it relates to the pre-certification costs, I would allow them to defer their pre-certification costs. And in terms of the associated carrying costs, I would use the short-term debt rate. And then for pre-construction costs, I would authorize them to record those pre-construction costs, which is alternative 1. But in terms of timing, I would not allow that to start accruing until 1 day after the date of our final decision. Commissioner Nowak.
Yeah, I think we most recently took this up with Wisconsin Power and Light. And I found it reasonable there and here. I do as well to allow the pre-certification costs and the pre-construction costs to defer, and then carrying costs for the pre-certification costs at the short-term debt rate. But I also, on the pre-construction costs, join you, as I did in the previous one, that it begins accruing 1 day after the date of the final decision. So I'm at alternative 2 on that one. Otherwise, I'm at alternative 1 on all other positions.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Huebner.
Yeah, thank you. We have seen this before from WPL, and I had to look back and remind myself of that discussion. And Chair, you and I have flipped positions on pre-certification costs. So I am actually on that one at Alt 2 for that. And the reason was based on our statement of principles or statement of position, SOP 9401. As I looked at those 4, it did not appear to me that this met those. Because it was a very small amount of money. It's $500,000. I didn't see that as causing serious harm. It's not unusual anymore because we're seeing it annually, and it's in control of the utility. So that one seemed, so I landed at L2 on that one. And so then I wouldn't accrue the carrying costs. But then on pre-construction, I was at alternative 1, as you both were, to allow that with the construction work in progress and AFUDC as described. And then for the timing, I'm at the same spot as you both. Alt 2, 1 day after the final decision in this docket. And I'll second the motion. I don't have a,
So
yeah.
you're where she was last time, and she's
Yep.
where you are this time.
Yep.
Got it. You guys keep things interesting. Okay, so we'll just do one big motion?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Docket 6680 AF 103, I move that we approve the request of Wisconsin Power and Light Company for deferral of incremental pre-certification costs and begin accruing allowance for funds used during construction on pre-construction costs associated with the development of the battery energy storage system pursuant to our discussion today.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That concludes our official business for today. Our next open meeting is scheduled for Thursday, February 23rd, 2023 at 10:30 a.m. I'm going to venture that there will not be another snowstorm because it is Commissioner Nowak's last open meeting. And I would encourage everybody who's able to attend that meeting because there will be cake, not just for Commissioner Nowak, but for Bob as well.
And cookies.
And so,
I'm making cookies.
Oh, good. Bonus. All right. Even better. Okay. So I would encourage anybody who is able to please join us in recognizing both Commissioner Nowak and Bob. And Bob, it's going to be sad to no longer have the emails that go out to commissioners plus Bob.
I'm gonna have to go buy more butter now if you invited everybody. Okay.
Well, today's a good day to bake.
No,
so
I'm
you
getting
can
worried.
get a start.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Are we adjourned?
Oh, oh,
We need to adjourn.
she moves.
Yeah.
No, you do. You move to
Oh.
adjourn.
Oh, and we stand adjourned until Thursday. She always does. Thursday, February 23rd.
Second?
Oh, yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We're adjourned.
I'm going all Diane Feinstein here.
We got one more week to get this ready.
All right.